All right. I was yelling and screaming at Ken for the last 2 or 3 days. Get off my back, get off my back. I'm tired. I got too much work to do because I had to get ready for this because this is a very important place for me to be. And I always go with the freshers. I just made this map like 2 or 3 days ago. Well, let's take a look at the world since 9/11, or the world the way it is today. Now, a few symbols. Stress point. Africa we'll deal with in a separate map. But everywhere you see flames, there's pending military or very serious political stress, all since 9/11. Chinese investment in oil and gas. We're going to talk a lot about China tonight. Pending Chinese investment in oil and gas. Well, let's just stop for a minute. Let's just talk about this. China's energy use went up 40% last year. China is now the second largest energy importer on the planet after the United States. Its economy is growing at 8, 9, 10% a year. China's already having blackouts. They're on a panicked global search for energy. They'll go wherever they have to get it. China now has made some interesting investments. They're about ready to build a pipeline across Burma, right here, so that all the oil tankers supplying China from the Persian Gulf no longer have to sail through the Straits of Malacca, a very narrow strait between like Singapore and Malaysia over here, which is one of the most crowded and militarily volatile points on the planet right now. Of course, the tsunami kind of messed with that, and I don't have any theories about the tsunami. Please. But the major stress is now coming with Japan, which is up here. Where did Japan go? There's Japan. Thank you, up here. Japan and China. And we're going to talk about this because Russia just announced it was going to, after 3 years and much wrangling, Russia just said it's going to build a pipeline out here which will deliver its oil to Japan, and they can also sell to Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, all these economies, Australia down here, as opposed to building a pipeline right down here into China. Now, the game is not over yet. Recently, by the way, we had, as the decision was being reached, a Chinese nuclear submarine was caught, if you will, in Japanese waters. Almost touched off an incident. There's small oil discoveries down here. The U.S. military just had a war game with 7 aircraft carrier battle groups. Never been done this last summer. 7 aircraft carrier battle groups right down here in the South China Sea off of Taiwan. China's going wherever it can to get oil. Now, Russia said we'll send rail cars, which they're already doing, to China. There's something else going on here, and there's something moving under the carpet because Japan is wedded to the United States. There's an emerging alliance with Russia, China, India, and Brazil, but they call it BRIC. Britain, Russia, India, and China. BRIC. You'll hear that a lot more. It's an emerging economic alliance. The Chinese want to build a pipeline across here so that their tankers don't have to come down here, and it's a much shorter route. Plus, there was a small oil discovery just made recently right here off the coast of Burma. So the Chinese are moving in here. The Chinese are just throwing money in Africa, and you'll see that in a minute. I'm going to save Africa separately. But the Chinese just signed a $200 billion deal. That's a lot of money. Okay? $200 billion deal with Iran. For oil and natural gas. India just signed a $40 billion deal with Iran for oil and natural gas. Europe is signing deals with Iran hand over fist. And I didn't even have time to make this slide. I read it last night, too tired when I was going to bed. It's going to be a huge news story. The president of Iran, Mohammed al-Khatami, is on currently a 7-nation African tour. And one story that just broke yesterday said Iran is about to close a major deal with Nigeria. Now, what do Iran and Nigeria have in common? OPEC members. And who's the other OPEC nation that has already told America to go stick it up its you-know-what? Venezuela. Remember, I don't know if you've seen my other lectures, but I did this for a long time. I had to take it out. I was getting old because I have to keep myself entertained as I do this too. But I had this great clip from Reuters that said, Chavez calls Bush asshole, and that was the headline of the story. And, okay, now, let's go back to this game that's in place. So this is the symbol for the yuan, or the renminbi, or just call it the yuan right now. That's a pending investment in Russia because Russia, throwing China a carrot, also said, well, we've just broken up this oil giant Yukos, and part of it went to Yugansk, I have to do the Russian right, Yugansk Neftegas, thank you, that was going to go through Gazprom that he might sell off to China, allowing China to buy part of Russia's oil. Okay, so the Chinese are now, they just did this $10 billion investment with Brazil and a $20 billion investment with Argentina. And look at this, Canada. You got to watch those damn Canadians, I'm telling you. You know? I've been to Canada 9 times in the last 4 years and I have yet to see a moose. I'm really upset. I want to see a moose. The Chinese are trying to bid, I think it's, I forget the number, I'm going to mess it up, $770 million to build a pipeline from the tar sands out to Vancouver so they can ship Canadian oil to China. All right, trivia question. Who is what country is the single largest supplier of oil to the United States? Canada. Ah. You think we're going to let China buy a pipeline in Canada? I don't know, because look at this. China has just offered $13 billion to buy Unocal. Now, why Unocal? Because Unocal holds almost all the exploration leases here. China's just thrown some, they had a small oil discovery, and it really was small. I mean, I'm talking 400 million barrels maybe in Cuba. Now, Cuba is a very unique place, but China's throwing money now in Cuba to help the Cubans develop their oil and gas. And of course, excuse me, now, in my other lectures, going back about a year now, I said, you watch, because we tried to overthrow Hugo Chavez 2 or 3 times in Venezuela, right? And it didn't work. There's a reason why they call him El Zorro. You know what that means? Who speaks Spanish, El Zorro? The fox, okay? And, you know, and right after Chavez called Bush an asshole, and that was the headline, he said, if the United States tries this one more time, I'm going to shut off all the oil to the U.S. 2 weeks later, a top-level delegation from China was in Caracas, Venezuela. And just 10 days ago, the Chinese announced the deal that they're going to buy 40% of Venezuela's oil. Do you hear the drums of war beating anywhere around here? Colombia is a mess. That's drugs, oil, and by the way, Chavez just recalled his ambassador to Bogota. So China's investing everywhere. Now, how many people have seen my video, The Truth and Lies of 9/11? Have the DVD? Ken brought about 40, 50 copies of that DVD. I recorded it at Portland State, November 2001. And baby, I pretty much hit the mark. Everything I said in November 2001 was going to happen. And here it is. We updated it just this last year with new stuff. But we put all these predictions in there about everything that's happening now. And one of the things we talked about, I think in the update, was what was going to happen with Venezuela. So we see now an economic war. Remember, war is the continuation of politics by other means. Politics is the continuation of economics by other means. Continuation of energy by other means. Can you see the continuum and where this continuum appears to be leading? Okay, it's going to get a lot scarier here in a minute. The Ukraine, Russia, by the way, the Ukrainian election is far from resolved. You have the 2 candidates, Yushchenko, who is, we'll call him the Bill Clinton guy, and we have Yanukovych, who is the old Stalin guy, But he's filed something, I saw something that he had enough suits to fill up 10 dump trucks or enough documentation. He was going to tie the election up for a long time. Russia cannot afford to lose access to Ukraine because it's right on the Black Sea, and it will shut Russia off from access to the Black Sea and also from several ports. But more importantly, it will lock Russia out of Europe. It will make Russia an Asian nation. To sound like Brzezinski, who I quoted way back in my Truth and Lies video. You like Brzezinski? That's where I did all my foreign accents, which was really a lot of fun. The German accent was extremely satisfying for me to perform on the stage, as I quoted Zbigniew Brzezinski, yes? Anyway, Russia cannot afford to lose that, and the U.S. cannot afford to let them have it. So now we got all these flashpoints that could lead to war, but you see where the biggest flames are right here. The crossed rifles indicate U.S. military deployment roughly since 9/11. Again, I'm leaving out the Middle East, but if you look at the Middle East, of course, we already see what's happening there. And I've been predicting, actually it was about 2 years ago that I said that we were deliberately going to create a civil war in Iran so that we could Balkanize it. Excuse me, in Iraq, so that we could Balkanize it. And boy, it sure does look like that's going to happen. You know that only 4 provinces may not be able to vote in the election on January 30th. And those 4 provinces house 50% of the Iraqi population, and they're all Sunni. Yeah. Yeah. Because we don't need to occupy the whole country, ladies and gentlemen. We only need to occupy the parts where the oil is. So if there's a civil war, we can let all those other useless areas. Why do we need to put troops there? Remember that map I showed you where all the oil was? It's just in a little tiny sliver of the country. Part of it's controlled by the Kurds, part of it's by the Shias. Okay, this is more about the, that was kind of sexy, it just turned around, okay. Ayatollah alarms Sunnis with pledge of security force purge, and this talks more about the setup for the civil war that's coming. Most of the aid for the Sunni rebels in Iraq is coming, of course, from Iran. That's no big secret. I have sources in Iran who have told me that. I've met them at international conferences, at oil conferences. That's no big secret. But we clearly seem to be letting the Sunnis have their way, and that's because we clearly intend to start the civil war and balkanize the country. But now we come back. Let's look at some of the support stuff about Asia's great oil hunt before we go to Africa. And if you thought the world map was bad. Okay, Asia's great oil hunt. China needs energy more than ever. The quest to secure enough oil and gas to keep its economy humming will change the world. No kidding. It already is changing the world. Also, I should clearly say that in the title of my book, Crossing the Rubicon, the subtitle of which is The Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil, I will sound like Kissinger now, or I will sound like a Roman emperor. Maybe I should do this better in a British accent. You know, if I were to say, an empire that is incapable of protecting its tributary and vassal states is a carcass ripe for the picking by hungry vultures. This is from the Asia Times. This is the story about the $200 billion deal with Iran and China. Now, do you possibly think that the Chinese were thinking, if we put $200 billion in investment in Iran, and India puts $40 billion, and Germany puts $8 billion, and Malaysia puts another $5 billion, do you think the Americans will come bomb the country? What the world has done is to draw a line in the sand around Iran. But the neocons, the insane maniacs that they are, may actually believe that they have to push that button. Now here's the point where I talk about, you know, with my grandiloquence and my confidence that we've drawn you this wonderful map in Crossing the Rubicon. Here's where I go off the map. And I'm going. Now, understand something very clearly, is that we all know that Iraqi oil production has not soared since we occupied or liberated the country, right? Iraqi oil production peaked in 1990 at 3.5 million barrels a day. It's never been over 2.3 million barrels a day since. They have pipelines over there that have been blown up so many times they've been nicknamed the Flute, which they borrowed from the Colombians. Oh, and here's something really scary, and this is just a sidebar, but I read this and I just went, oh my God. I clipped a little story that said Halliburton, you know, Kellogg, Brown and Root, that runs all the, you know, a lot of the mercenaries and everything else. They've just hired a couple of hundred Colombian paramilitaries who've been fighting the FARC rebels to go over to Iraq. And I can see Dick Cheney saying, oh, these Iraqi guys think they're bad? Wait till my Colombian guys get over there. I mean, you know, we just posted a story on the website from a British paper. I think it was the Guardian or the Telegraph, and I forget the author's name, but it is one of the most well-written and heartbreaking stories about the hell that Iraq has become. The absolute hell on earth, what we have done to that country. And that's, of course, clearly what would happen in Iran. But what the world is saying is, wait a minute, Japan gets a lot of its oil from Iran. China gets some of its oil from Iran. All these countries, and those countries will not allow the United States to invade Iran, because what's going to happen if we invade Iran, like Iraq? The same thing that happened in Iraq. And Iran is 10 times the military foe, 5 times the military foe that Iraq was. The world will not let the United States, so it will be a nuclear confrontation the moment the neocons begin or even indicate that we are going to bomb Iran. The world will not let that happen. They can't let it happen. You can't take Iranian oil off the market. There's nowhere else to go for oil, and the world is short of oil as it is. So the line in the sand has been drawn. But yet look at the context in China. China warns of more power cuts. China's been having blackouts. Do you know that? All along the major industrialized cities, Shanghai, all over, where Toyota and General Motors and Microsoft and all the industrialized countries that have their factories in Iran, their factories are going down with the blackouts. Why? Because China doesn't have enough coal, natural gas, and oil to keep the electricity going. China's desperate. And we haven't even got to the dollar yet. So that story is from, that's BBC News, October 5th. That's fairly recent. We come ahead. This is a more recent story. 9 provinces may face winter blackouts. Tell me the world isn't running out of energy. Now, there are lots of infrastructure questions, and we can talk about that later. I'm sure we'll get to it in questions and answers. Chinese state-owned oil firm Sinopec confirms interest in Alberta oil sands. The Chinese want to buy Canadian oil. China's rising grain prices could signal global food crisis. UK expects Brussels to lift China arms ban. The EU may turn on us and lift the ban on weapons sales to China. India finds $40 billion friend in Iran. Panicked India goes after Iranian, Russian, and American energy assets, competing directly with China, a move that is costly and may not work. Now remember that BRIC alliance? Brazil, Russia, India, China? Well, here's a Chinese guy saying, you know, India and China may wind up in competition with each other, but for the time being, they are deliberately not competing with each other. That's what's interesting. They've been enemies for a long time, but they seem to be playing to the same sheet music. Gee, this is from just a couple of days ago. This is what, January 13th? 13th. U.S. intelligence, the CIA report forecasts India and China will be major powers in 2020. Now here comes the CIA, and my response to this is, duh. I don't know what happened here. Something dropped out again. Oop. Okay, there's the world energy map, which the way it's looking. And now we come to, shortly, Venezuela and China sign oil deal. That's Hugo Chavez just recently. The date on this was down at the bottom. I can barely read it. January 2nd, 2005. U.S. to look into Venezuela's oil supply reliance. Okay, the Senate's starting to panic now. Uh-oh. You know, here's the key. It takes 6 weeks to get a drop of oil from the Persian Gulf into your gas tank. It takes 2 weeks to get a drop of oil from Nigeria or Angola into your gas tank. It takes 4 days to get a drop of Venezuelan oil into your gas tank. If there is no elasticity in the world supply, where do you want to have your hands on the oil first? Venezuela. Chinese National Offshore Oil Company eyes $13 billion bid for rival. That's the story on Unocal. See, I back up everything I do. China expanding into U.S. oil sweet spot. That's another story on Unocal. U.S. struggles to encircle China. Sounds like China's successfully encircling us, don't you think? This is Africa. Let's just let that sink in. You know, maybe as a work of art it'll say more than if I explain everything to you. But let me just run over some of the highlights. The red is guerrilla by recent I mean within the last 18 months. Recent guerrilla conflict or civil unrest, right here. Recent coup or coup attempt, here. And want to overthrow the government. China and India are throwing money heavily into Sudan. They're heavily dependent on Sudanese oil. Uganda, there's oil exploration. U.S. military here, British military activity here, U.S. military, U.S. military, U.S. military. Nigeria, again, looks to be the boiling point. That's an original OPEC member. Angola is the 9th largest supplier of American oil. Nigeria is, I think, number 6 supplier of the U.S. They just opened a pipeline from Chad, Cameroon. The French were just flying Mirage fighter jets to quell a revolt in Côte d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast. Of course, remember the U.S. military just went into Liberia not too long ago. Morocco, tied to the Spanish bombing, oil exploration. Kerr-McGee and Halliburton are going heavy here. So if we look at the military activity, and here's recent disease outbreaks, and I should have added, I did add, but we left it off, we will get it on, other than AIDS. Congo Crimean hemorrhagic fever, which is a form of Ebola where the victim melts in front of your eyes, and major meningitis outbreaks suddenly in Niger recently, and never rule out biological warfare. We don't have a lot of time to talk about this. But remember, Ayatollah Mohammed al-Khatami is currently, right now, on a 7-nation Africa tour doing deals with all of these nations. If he does a deal with Nigeria, now I talked to my dear friend, by the way, and wonderful friend, and just sworn in for her 6th term in the United States Congress, the Honorable Cynthia McKinney of Georgia. God bless her, and she will have, I'm not at liberty to discuss what I know about her committee assignments, but we do know that there will be at least some good news in her committee assignments, and that's for her to announce. But thank God she's on the Hill. I mean, she's the last light on the, anyway. But I was discussing this Africa stuff with her, and she says, the one thing you got to remember in Nigeria is that bribery is the chief occupation. So we don't know what's going to happen. But clearly Africa has been a stress point. And more than 2 years ago, and from the wilderness, I was saying, you've got to watch it because NATO has moved in. We just had the coups in Sao Tome and Principe. The Navy is about to build a base here. U.S. Navy is heavy here. NATO announced it's taking a major interest in West Africa. And we have recent within the last 6 months to a year, U.S. military deployments or assistance in all of these areas around here. I'm going to add to this Chinese military assistance as soon as I can get all the data on that. But obviously this is going to be a major boiling point. So, that's the voice of America saying, I love this, the voice of America, that's CIA, saying, China's new African oil ties create concerns. Yeah, no kidding. Now, Michael Clare, who also writes a lot, he's a wonderful professor, we've sold his books on my website, has written recently on this, and he says he's documented Pentagon officials have begun to look for permanent bases in the area, focusing on Senegal, Ghana, Mali, Uganda, and Kenya. The Wall Street Journal has reported that a key mission for U.S. forces would be to ensure that Nigeria's oil fields, which in the future could account for as much as 25% of all U.S. oil imports, are secure. Now, I've got to put that back in the context of peak oil. Nigeria's peaked, by the way. Almost every major country in the world is now in decline. One field in Saudi Arabia, Ghawar, which is the single largest field on the planet, accounts for something like 40% of all of Saudi Arabia's oil production. And Ghawar may be on the verge of collapse. Ghawar is, they're deep into secondary recovery. And in an oil field, that's where you have to pump water in, inject it to drive the oil up so that you can pump it out. OPEC recently was able to increase production a couple of, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 million barrels a day. Not much, but they use a bottle brush technique, which is horizontal drilling, which has a horizontal drill with like a number of sprinkler heads on it where they inject the water. Now what that does though is it erodes the field. It tends to collapse the reservoir or the source rock faster. And they had a field in Qatar go like this, Qatar or Kuwait, that as soon as they reached 80% water cut, and I'll explain that in a second, the whole field just collapsed. It was over, it was done. We have credible source records showing now that in much of Saudi Arabia they're at 55% water cut, which means that every day 55% of what they pump out of the ground is the same seawater they pumped in that morning. If Ghawar goes, okay, this is where FTW was off the map, where I don't have answers. We're off the map if the U.S. invades Iran. All I can say is bend over and kiss your butt goodbye. A plan for a nuclear war, I don't know what to tell you about that. And if Ghawar collapses, and if it's even announced that Ghawar collapses, you will see the world's financial markets absolutely implode within 7 days. Ghawar, the single largest oil field in Saudi Arabia. China threat strengthens U.S.-Japan military ties. This is the story from Asia Times where they talk about the the Chinese nuclear submarine. Told you I back up everything. Play larger based on the theater East China Sea. It's around here. It's in here someplace. But this is where I got the nuclear submarine story from. Now, Japan is hopelessly wedded to the U.S. Because of the dollar. Okay, so we've got the Asia picture. Now we've talked about energy. Now we've, and here's another one. Everybody read that headline? Russia may stop exporting energy sources by 2010. Russia is about to have their second peak of production. They can't export at the rate they're exporting for much longer. So what's this big Siberian pipeline all about? You have to play all these cards together, and peak is hitting everywhere. You have to factor in decline occurring throughout countries all around the world. You cannot assume static production. And look at this. From the Miami Herald, which actually came from the Associated Press, this is just December 13th, China and Russia will hold their first ever joint military exercises. Does that scare you? How many people have read my recent economic alert, As the World Burns? Oh, dear. I hate to see what I'm going to do to a lot of people who haven't read it yet. From the Wilderness has only published in our lifetimes ever 3 economic alerts. The first was September the 9th, 2001, 2 days before the World Trade Center attacks. Warning of an imminent stock plunge in the stock markets. The second one was in June of 2002, immediately before the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost almost 2,000 points, wiping out some $40 trillion in shareholder equity, including your 401k plans, your state pension funds, and everything else. Do you remember that in 2002? Any of you who had investments? Okay. This was our third ever. There is a pending total and complete collapse of the dollar, and it will happen with the complete blessing and encouragement of the Bush administration. And you will be the chief losers, especially those of you who are in debt, especially for those of you who believe that your house will save you. How many people here own a home? How many people here believe that that's your savings? See, I'd rather ask the gay question again. You guys are lying, you know. You guys are lying through your teeth, okay? How many people own your homes outright? Okay, let me flip the question. How many people have one mortgage? How many people have two mortgages? How many people have more than two mortgages? This is about as serious as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. We wrote this, and it's now a free story on the website. It is. Yes, it is a free story now. You need to go read this. It's been picked up and corroborated by a number of people, including my dear friend Richard Heinberg, and one of my closest collaborators, Marshall Auerbach, an incredible economic writer who writes for the Prudent Bear. He's based in London. We collaborate. He and I agree, but we have seen people like Stephen Roach of Morgan Stanley, a Wall Street guru, say an economic Armageddon is imminent. How many people have credit cards? How many people of those who have credit cards are currently carrying zero balances on all of your credit cards? Oh, you lie. World on the brink of ruin. Stephen Roach, this is quotes about Stephen Roach, who said economic Armageddon. Many clear warnings. Warren Buffett. Okay, if you don't like Mike Ruppert, listen to Stephen Roach and Warren Buffett. You may not trust them. You may think that they're rich capitalist, swine, dog, elitist, whatever you want to call them, but they're talking about their own money here. And when these guys talk, people listen, because the fundamentals are all clearly in place. And the problems are several-fold behind the economic crash that is coming that will be nothing like we have ever seen before. Nothing. We're about to start selling a book, an excellent book by James Turk called The Coming Crash of the Dollar and How to Survive It, which says very clearly that housing values, you can expect them to drop 50% over a 2-year period. And that from the lady who had no mortgages. Yes. The Coming Crash of the Dollar and How to Survive It. You'll see it up for sale on the website at From the Wilderness in a couple of weeks. The author's name is James Turk. You can look it up on Amazon, or it's a great little book. Okay, here's part of the problem. U.S. per capita debt and GDP. The relationship to per capita debt as a relationship of gross domestic product. What that means, literally, on several fronts, speaking from an economic standpoint, it means that we are borrowing to create a bubble economy. The United States today depends upon $2 billion a day in foreign direct investment. That means the Chinese, the British, the French, the Russians, the Malaysians, the Brazilians, all of them have to come to Washington, D.C. and buy treasury bills. That's why you are allowed to borrow at low interest rates on your credit cards or for your home loans or for your refinances. We are living in a bubble economy that is sustained, jobs are sustained by nothing but debt, borrowed money, all underwritten by foreign people putting their money into the dollar. How many people are aware that the dollar is starting to do this? Oh, you were paying attention to that. Okay, that's good. You might not have seen a story that I clipped from the Wall Street Journal or New York Times that I mentioned that said, my agent's looking at his watch, get the hook. What do you mean? I'm doing, we do this all the time. It's not even 9:30 yet. I see everybody's got to pee, but that's okay. How many people have to pee? Okay, when we get to 60%, well, no, okay. All right. All right. We have to keep borrowing to sustain this bubble because there's no real manufacturing left in this country. Okay? And people are being encouraged to borrow, to spend, which sustains the economy, which is only sustainable. But there was this little story I clipped from the paper that said, you know, people are getting surprised all over the world because their credit card rates, there's a little contract that says the credit card company can adjust the rates. And we were seeing people's minimum payments go from $200 a month to $450 a month, just because the interest rate went from 5% to 18 or 24%. That's part of the falling dollar. Part of it, just the beginning. The U.S. trade deficit is the other key component. That's the size of the trade deficit. It just broke a new record last month, which means that we are buying everything overseas and we're not making anything here, and we're getting all of our stuff made there, and it's all money flowing out, and then we borrow the money and we ship it back out, and you guys are in the middle as literally the conduit for this cycle, because you're encouraged to borrow and to spend beyond your means and not save so that you can keep this bubble afloat. And the United States government is literally about to tank and destroy the dollar. America's foes prepare for monetary jihad. Yeah, and that includes George Bush, Jack Snow, the Secretary of the Treasury, Dick Cheney, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve in New York, and the Chairman of Greenspan, and the Chair of the New York Fed. They're all planning a major war on you, on your dollar. Central banks can't count the cost of weak dollars. Now, the euro is now up to about $1.31 or 32, I think it was, $1.31 the last time I checked it. If you're a European central bank, the US dollar is the largest reserve currency in the world. It's the way we get all this cheap oil, because we make everybody buy oil in dollars. That's the way oil has been priced. You should know that Saddam Hussein decided to price his oil in euros in, what was it, 2000? Or 1999. And that is probably one of the major reasons why we had to go kick his butt out of there. And guess what? This year, Iran is going to open an oil futures bourse. That's like a little stock market trading oil in euros. Okay, central banks count the loss of dollars. Now, all these foreign central banks, because oil and energy and everything else was priced in dollars, would go buy a lot of dollars. But what's happening is that the dollar is going in value. But the euro is going, and the Europeans don't like that, because nobody's buying European products. But I think Europe can withstand that, and I think Europe will withstand that. But the central banks holding dollars are declaring losses. The European Central Bank, you can barely see the headline, and this just came out like 2 or 3 days ago. European Central Bank to report 2004 budget loss due to dollar drop. All these countries that are holding dollars now are losing money. So if you were holding an asset, by the way, one of the best definitions of asset that I've ever heard in my life, to really help you clarify your thinking, because you've been totally brainwashed, an asset is something that makes you money. A liability is something that costs you money. Is your house an asset or a liability? Liability. Ah, thank you. Okay. All right. ECB to report 2000. If you got assets that are losing value, what would you do? Would you get rid of your assets if you saw that they were going to lose a lot more value? All right, now what happens, you see, the idea, the trick for all these countries is to get out of the dollar without causing a run on the dollar. But the run will come. It has to come sooner or later. You've heard of the bank runs in the 1930s, okay? So when every country, and you know, I've got some stories here, I think. Thailand, what is this? Foreign reserves, secret, yeah, Thailand is starting to bail out of the dollar. Wobbly dollar spells trouble for central bankers. That's in Australia. China has just authorized 4 of its banks to start selling dollar assets. Mexico has started dumping dollars a little bit. EU to begin trade talks with Iran. Whoa, Europe's going to Iran's rescue now in the middle of the falling dollar crisis.
And European drug dealers will no longer accept the dollar.
Oh, wait a minute. Who said that? Who said that? Watch my next slide. There it is, right there. Bravo. Whoa. Was it, are you on coffee or drugs or what are you on, man? All right, here it is. Even drug dealers are giving up on the dollar. How many have followed my work for more than 2 years? Well, how did I get my start in this? CIA and drugs, $600 billion a year in drug money flowing through Wall Street. If the dollar gets weak, people aren't going to put their dollars in Wall Street, are they? Because they aren't going to have dollars. Wall Street only trades in dollars. Now, I was a small-time narc investigator. I was hoping to work up to the big case. Actually, I got the biggest case of all. I got the White House CIA deal on drugs. But in the 80s and 90s, you know, during the big cocaine heydays, you know, when Pablo Escobar and Carlos Later and, and the Ochoa brothers and the Medellin and the Cali cartels and were running around, they would have pallets of $100 bills and they wouldn't count the money, they would weigh it. I'm serious. I am not kidding you. They could weigh it out, and know if it was a couple $100 off, and it wasn't worth their time to settle it beyond that. They would shrink wrap them and bury them. Now, the $100 bill is going down in value. Euro's worth 131. The euro has a 200 euro note, which is worth 262 US dollars. Now, if you're a drug guy and you're really concerned about the number of bills you carry, what's better, a 200 euro note or the $100 bill that's going down in value? If the drug dealers are playing the dollar, you better believe the dollar's game is over, because the drug dealers are some of the smartest money men I've ever met in my life. And here it says, right here, it says Euro trash, drug dealers, or don't give me no more dollars, man. We don't want your stinking dollars, okay? Here's on the housing bubble. Residential property prices are now falling in Britain and Australia. And this is a clear story from The Economist. And we had this up on the website a couple of weeks ago. From The Economist in Britain, that the housing bubble is a global housing bubble. And it will have a global impact. It's already starting to pop in Britain and Australia. Now, we're going to have a story from Catherine Austin Fitz, another one of my dear, dear friends, and she deserves a round of applause for those of you who know her. Fearless woman. Wrote a wonderful story with Chris Sanders of Sanders Research in Great Britain, and she put out that there are probably 3 times more paper mortgages than there are physical properties in the United States. How many people have ever heard of the fact that they're trading pools of mortgage-backed securities, like mutual funds, but it's all mortgages? And they've fraudulently cooked. You heard about a scandal at Fannie Mae? A $9 billion scandal? Freddie Mac's coming soon? Those books are as cooked as the books on Enron, and all of your mortgages are based on that. Now, all of this stuff can be happening all at once. So that's kind of what it's beginning to look like. Now, I can focus on 9/11, which has already run over me, kicked my butt, or I can try to help you with what's coming so that you can prepare. And there are things that you can do, and we will ask. But right now, if I were to tell you the one thing that I thought you needed to do, it's get out of debt immediately. I'm serious. Because when these chickens come home to roost, the people who are in debt, and there's stuff coming with civil liberties. We may have a debtor's prison here soon. The bankruptcy laws have changed. Start exploring precious metals, clearly. The only investment personally I will make is in physical gold. That's it. Gold that I own and I hold. Maybe some silver. Period. I'm going to buy some real estate, but not till after the housing bubble collapses. Why should I? U.S. to become net food importer in 2005. These are just some miscellaneous things I'm going to throw out at you here. Net food importer in 2005. New coal plants buried Kyoto. There are 850 new coal-fired plants around the world on the drawing boards or under construction. Why? We're running out of oil. Now, how many people are following global climate change and climate collapse? The fact that the North Pole is melting, the oil companies actually like that. I'll show you that in a second. No, I'm serious. Okay, so we may have a climate collapse behind this panic. And I said 2.5, 3 years ago with peak oil, you're going to see the U.S. going to nuclear and coal. What choice do we have? Of course, that's going to accelerate global warming. It's going to accelerate the pollution in the air. It's going to accelerate everything else. And the Saudis telling fairy tales, and this is what I'm talking about, Gawar. Saudis cannot likely increase production. We're very close to at peak. Army reserves becoming broken force. How do you follow? You've got an Army Reserve guy just refused his second deployment to Iraq. You see that story? God bless him. We already have a backdoor draft. The reserves and the Guard are broken force. How many vets we got in the room tonight? God bless you all, one and all. Vietnam vets, God bless you one and all. We got to do something, and it looks like it's already happened. We need some of those great songs we had back in the 60s back again. No, I won't sing any for you tonight. But the military is absolutely, from a manpower standpoint, on the verge of collapse. I have said that a draft is inevitable. Now, you may have followed from the wilderness. We followed the most for the draft is Stan Goff, my military affairs editor. For those of you who don't know, Stan is a retired master sergeant from U.S. Army Special Forces who taught tactics and military science at West Point. He's one of the best writers I have ever been blessed to lay my eyes upon his words. Sometimes his writing is so good I have to smoke a cigarette when I'm done. But Stan and I both believe that the draft is coming. But if the economy collapses totally, people are unemployed, and everybody of draft age or military age is out of work, and people are starving on the streets, and the military says, hey, I'll give you a bed job, 3 hots and a cot, come on. Maybe that's another way around the draft. But we already have a draft in effect with the Guard and Reserve. Long-term plans sought for terror suspects. It's now being charged that it's possible to hold someone in custody for life without trial. For their life without trial. Now, all of you fools who want to go out and say we want to change something by electing somebody, if you still believe in the electoral process, you do need drugs. Okay? If you still believe that we have a constitution that protects us, you need electroshock therapy. Okay? Long-term, locking people up for life without trial. And here's the latest. Evidence from torture usable in court, U.S. asserts. What does it take? Oil drilling easier with melting ice. So the oil companies are saying, hey, let's melt the North Pole because we can get a little more oil, and we can actually move ships through the Northwest Passage to ship Russian oil over to Japan if we need to, because it's a shorter route, the polar route. I have written extensively about PROMIS software, Prosecutors Information Management System. Prosecutors Management Information System. It's heavily throughout. Crossing the Rubicon, it's how Dick Cheney, and we're going to break some major stories confirming that PROMIS, evolutions of PROMIS software were in use in the Presidential Operations Center, but now it's in space. The Pentagon has announced they want to have a super artificially intelligence enhanced eye in the sky, God's eye view, space web that will monitor all human activity in real time. They're already monitoring you in real time through your computer, and you probably didn't even know it. Surveillance in the war on terrorism, what's in a name? We heard of total information awareness, which is, and I want to spend just a second on this, a program that John Poindexter introduced. He got fired, but the software was developed, and I tracked this very carefully. They've changed the name now twice. And basically what it is your medical records are in a database in your doctor's office and with your insurance company. And your driver's license is with the state of Washington. And your banking records are with the bank. Total information awareness can take every computerized database record without necessarily even the permission of, because PROMIS is installed through the back door in all of these systems, and merge every aspect about you into a real-time database. That's total information awareness. Everything from your driving history to your medical records to your bank account to your last transaction at the local supermarket. Remember those little cards you swipe to get, it goes right into the computer. That's total information awareness. It's also active now in a number of holes. How many people believe that you are protected from spying as you surf the web? Well, no. Mac users are immune from viruses. They are not immune from keyloggers. And keyloggers are the latest thing. Corporations and government are both doing them. I'm happy to say that I think very soon there will be an announcement that a product has been developed by some trustworthy people that does allow you to be absolutely immune from anybody hacking your computer or seeing what you're doing. I can't disclose more, but you need to watch the FTW website. But that will piss a lot of people off, and we certainly hope so. Yeah. Our new DHS nominee, Michael Chertoff, is a staunch advocate of data mining, which is what they call the super advanced artificial intelligence software that can watch everything that you do, whether you're online, your cell phone calls, everything. He's a big advocate of that. Another elephant coming down the pike. Just to put this in perspective, 1 million barrels of oil a day are being lost to depletion right now. Planet's in decline. Oil headway will fail to meet demand by 2007. Bottom line is, and I'm going to shut up here in a second, I'm going to come to the punchlines. I need to make all of this very, very time sensitive for you, because there is now a time limit that is becoming clear to all of us. It is becoming acknowledged by government. It's becoming acknowledged by those of us who have been studying peak oil. Listen to this very carefully. The rate of major new oil field discoveries has fallen dramatically in recent years. There were 13 discoveries of over 500 million barrels in 2000. Remember, 1 billion barrels every 11 days. 6 in 2001 and just 2 in 2002, according to the industry analyst IHS Energy. That's the one everybody goes to. For 2003, not a single new discovery of over 500 million barrels has been reported. Between 2003 and early 2007, some 8 million barrels a day of new capacity is expected to come on stream. In 2005, 18 projects with a potential peak capacity of 3 million barrels per day are due to come on stream, showing in 2006 with 11 new projects, followed by 3 in 2007 and 3 in 2008, adding a cumulative 4 million barrels per day. It appears likely that from 2007, the volumes of new production will fall short of the need to replace lost capacity from depleting older fields. That's one source. We come to a second source. That was this year. Oil supply shortages likely after 2007. This is the Oil Depletion Analysis Center. Again, looking at everything that's coming online, because we know how long it takes to bring an oil field online. It takes anywhere in between 4 to 7 years to bring a mega field online. So if we know what fields have been discovered, we know what production capacity is coming down the pike, we know that if there have been no new discoveries, we can certainly calculate future production and match it against estimates of decline. So there's a second source, but look at this. Let me go back. I will tell you that God, I hope I put it in there. From the Wilderness came up with these numbers. Dale Allen Pfeiffer, our editor, came up with these numbers a year and a half ago. And they've just been confirmed by 2 other official sources. 2007, 2008 means that supply will no longer be able to meet demand. Now bear in mind that we live in a world economic paradigm that is governed by fractional reserve banking, debt-based growth, which means that we live in a pyramid scheme, because if the U.S. economy doesn't grow, it implodes. Forget growth. We can't maintain stasis as of 2007 in consumption. So we know 2007, 2008, Richard Duncan of Oregon, one of the godfathers of peak oil research. This is a paper that he has just finished writing, the Olduvai Cliff event circa 2007. Now he's a PhD. The paper is currently undergoing peer review. For those of you who are academics here, you know what that means. That means here's my scientific work, everybody else pick it apart. So far it's holding up, and I will be able to publish it From the Wilderness pretty soon. But if you probably cheated. The Olduvai theory and the Olduvai Gorge is the first known evidence of human civilization. That's where he says we're going back to. The Olduvai theory states that the life expectancy of industrial civilization, defined in terms of world energy use, is less than or equal to 100 years. We know that peak oil, E, per capita hydrocarbon production, I told you this already, occurred in 79, and that E, peak oil energy production per capita, declined from 79 to 99. That's the slope. Future, Olduvai theory predicts that the E will decline even faster from 2000 to the so-named cliff event, the slide. A previous study put the cliff event at 2012. However, it now appears that that was too optimistic. The following study indicates the cliff event will occur about 5 years earlier than 2012, which is what? 2007, due to an epidemic of rolling blackouts that have already begun in the U.S. And they have already begun in the U.S., haven't they? And around the world. Remember all the ones in Europe? The electrical epidemic spreads nationwide, then worldwide, and by circa 2007, most of the blackouts are permanent. The modern way of life is history by 2025. Postulate 2 of the Olduvai theory states energy production per capita will decline exponentially from the cliff event 2008 to 2030. If that is true, then the population in the world's industrial nations, we argue, will go from about 3.3 billion in 2008 to about 0.9 billion in 2030, a net die-off of about 300,000 people per day in the 22 years from 2008 to 2030. That's in the industrialized world. Why? It'll hit us harder because we're all dependent on oil. And that's what scares me to death. This is the world population. From the time of Christ, Anno Domini, this little plague, the dip here is the bubonic plague. This is the beginning of the steam, coal, and that's oil. All of that population exists only because of oil and hydrocarbon energy. There are no replacements that will replace at the same level of consumption that we currently consume.
Build nuclear power!
Yeah. Unfortunately, not even that is feasible, even if everybody agreed to do it. There's a net energy loss, and we got a problem. So 9/11 is gone, but learn from it. That's why you need crossing the Rubicon. That's why you need that economic map that goes back before 9/11 and afterwards that gives you the map of this landscape. That's what's coming. Now, what we're going to do in the future, this is my newsletter from the wilderness. Stories now are breaking so fast that I cannot keep track of them. The world is changing so fast, and my obligation to all of my subscribers, to you and to everybody else, is to give you the information that may save your life, that's not being given to you, that can help you make decisions. So soon, I'm going to be expanding FTW. As soon as I get set up as a corporation to do that properly, and as soon as I can fund it, and I will, to monitor some 250 publications around the world on a 24/7 basis to bring you these little breaking stories like the ones I showed you tonight, and we will bring them to you on a daily basis so that you can have a wire that you can go to, that you can trust, that will tell you what's going on in the world. That's my commitment to you. Because you need that information. You need this information now because it's not about saving the world. It's about saving you. Because if you're equipped to save yourself, you can save somebody else close to you. Richard Heinberg and I, my very dear friend Richard Heinberg, who wrote The Party's Over and a couple of Power Down, thank you. We both see a devolution. From several books, the collapse of complex societies, and you got to understand that when these energy problems hit, they have ripple effects that become catastrophically dispersed throughout society, and they accelerate the decline. But Richard and I both see a devolution, and it's an axiom from anthropological research that when an empire breaks up, power decentralizes. To rephrase that, survival will become a local issue. And nobody, no grandfather, no Santa Claus, no George Bush, no Hillary Clinton, nobody is going to come bail you out of this problem. You got to be prepared to do it like my grandparents did, my grandparents did during the Great Depression. Neighbor took care of neighbor. You dealt with local food growing because globalization is dead. The 10,000 mile Caesar salad is gone. We ain't going to have any more strawberries from Chile, okay? Because the transportation fuel will not be available to bring it. Food production will revert to local. So look into permaculture, look into local, support, stop spending your money at Walmart or any other corporation that takes profit. Because I have proved this, and I have rankled more liberal, lefty, progressive people who said, Mike, you've got to give everything away for free. Do you think I could have written Crossing the Rubicon if I couldn't have paid the rent? Do you think I could publish my newsletter if I didn't pay every one of my writers a decent living wage? Progressives got to support progressives by giving your money to progressives. You charge for it because, damn it, the work that we do is valuable to each other. And we give each other energy that way. In 2001, when I spoke at Portland State University on my video, Truth and Lies of 9/11, and it's also on the DVD, I made a vow. And the vow was, you keep subscribing to my newsletter, you keep buying my products, and I will keep bringing you better information. And I've kept that vow, and I'm still living in the damn same single apartment I was living in then. But those of us who believe can perform better, those of us who are educators, who are activists, we can function better if our rent is paid, if we don't have to worry about where the next bill is coming from. So get over it. Start giving your money to other progressives and other activists. Stop giving it to Walmart. Stop giving it to Time Warner. Stop giving it to anybody else, and spend it because your life may depend upon the life you just saved by giving somebody else some money. That's important. Now, I'll shut up with this and just say that I know I've gone long, so what? Very few of you got up and left. I'll stay and answer questions. I know we got to be out of here by 11. I'm still going to sign books. I just want you to know that I'm scared. I'm scared because I don't have a clear picture of what's going on. All I know is that the maniacs, the lunatics, are not only running the asylum. I'm convinced they want to kill billions of people, but I'm also convinced, kind of like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, where he talks about the law of unintended consequences, you know, that these guys, Catherine Austin Fitz's line is great, those who win in a rigged game get stupid. These guys are really stupid. And we are in a lot of danger, and I cannot leave you with any other words that are most important for me to communicate to you except for prepare, prepare, prepare. Thank you, Seattle. Thank you.